My dad skipped my wedding. But when my $580 million hotel chain hit the news, Dad texted family dinner at 7 p.m. Important discussion. I showed up. The text message came through at 3:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. After 3 years of silence, my father decided 8 words were sufficient. Family dinner at 7 p.m. Important discussion. Don't be late. I stared at my phone screen in my corner office on the 42nd floor, watching those words like they might rearrange themselves into something that made sense. The last time Gerald Ashford had demanded my presence, I was 26 years old, standing in a bridal suite at the Rosewood Hotel, waiting for him to walk me down the aisle. He never showed. My assistant Melissa knocked softly before entering. The Forbes interview is confirmed for Thursday, and the Wall Street Journal wants a statement about the expansion into Tokyo. Send them the press release we prepared, I said, still looking at my phone. Melissa, clear my evening. Something's come up. She glanced at her tablet, then back at me with concern. You have the investor dinner at Cipriani. They flew in from Singapore specifically to meet with you. Reschedule it. I set my phone down and met her eyes. Family emergency. The word family tasted bitter. 3 years ago, my father had made his position clear. Building a hotel business from the ground up wasn't appropriate for an Ashford daughter. Marrying David Chen, a commercial architect whose parents immigrated from Taiwan, certainly wasn't suitable. My father had expected me to join Ashford Financial, marry someone from our social circle, and produce grandchildren who would summer in the Hamptons. Instead, I married David in a ceremony my father refused to attend. My mother, Constance, had come, tears streaming down her face as she apologized in whispers. My younger brother Thomas walked me down the aisle, his jaw tight with anger at our father. But Gerald Ashford stayed home, and when I called him the next day, he told me I'd made my choice. You want to build hotels with that man, fine, but don't come running back to me when it fails. You're not an Ashford anymore. Except I was still an Ashford. That name opened doors whether I wanted it to or not, and I'd used every connection, every ounce of knowledge from growing up in that world to build something that was entirely mine. Chen and Ashford Hospitality started with one boutique hotel in Brooklyn that everyone said would fail. David designed it. I managed operations, and we poured everything we had into making it perfect. 5 years later, we owned 43 properties across North America and Europe. The valuation had just hit $580 million, and the business press couldn't get enough of the story. Ashford rejects family fortune builds empire. Bloomberg had titled their feature last month. Forbes called me a hospitality visionary, redefining luxury for millennials. My father apparently had been reading the news. I left the office at 6:30, driving my Tesla through Manhattan traffic toward the Upper East Side townhouse where I'd grown up. The limestone facade looked exactly as I remembered. Imposing and cold. The doorman knew someone who didn't recognize me, and I had to wait while he called up to confirm my expected arrival. My mother answered the door herself, which was unusual. The housekeeper typically handled such things. Constance Ashford looked older than I remembered, more fragile, though she was only 58. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, her Chanel suit immaculate, but something in her eyes seemed tired. "Sweetheart," she said, pulling me into a hug that felt desperate. "I'm so glad you came. What's this about Mom?" She pulled back, glancing toward the dining room. "Your father will explain everything. Thomas is already here." My brother stood when I entered, crossing the room to embrace me. We'd stayed close despite everything, meeting for lunch every few weeks, carefully avoiding mentions of our father. Thomas had gone into the family business as expected, but he'd made it clear he disagreed with how Gerald had handled my situation. "You look good," he said. "Success agrees with you." "Where's Dad?" "Study." Making us wait as usual. Thomas poured me a glass of wine from the bottle, breathing on the sideboard. "Have you seen the latest news about Ashford Financial?" I accepted the glass. I don't follow his business. "You might want to start." Thomas lowered his voice. "The Bington deal fell through. The merger with Whitmore Capital collapsed last week. Dad's been putting out fires for months, but the board is getting nervous." Before I could respond, my father entered. Gerald Ashford, at 63, was still an imposing figure, tall and broad-shouldered, his silver hair giving him a distinguished air. He had put on weight since I'd last seen him, and there were new lines around his eyes, but his posture remained military straight. "Punctual," he said, as if I were an employee arriving for a meeting. "Good. Let's sit." No greeting. No acknowledgement that we hadn't spoken in 3 years. We took our places at the dining room table that could seat 16, but tonight held only 4 settings clustered at one end. The housekeeper served the first course in silence. My father waited until she'd left before speaking. I assume you know why I asked you here. I said evenly. I don't make assumptions about you anymore, Dad. Adding her name naturally, Thomas muttered under his breath. Easy, Linda. Something flickered across Gerald's face, surprise, hurt. It was gone too quickly to identify. Your business has been in the news quite a bit lately, he said. Impressive growth numbers. Thank you. The Tokyo expansion is ambitious. You're planning 15 properties in the first phase. I set down my fork. Dad, I didn't come here to discuss my business strategy with you. You said this was important. It is important. He leaned back in his chair. Ashford Financial is facing some challenges. The market has been volatile, and some of our recent investments haven't performed as projected. The board is pushing for diversification into new sectors. Thomas was staring at his plate, jaw clenched. My mother's hands were folded tightly in her lap. The hospitality sector shows strong growth potential, my father continued. Your company specifically has the kind of trajectory that would strengthen our portfolio considerably. The realization hit me like ice water. You want to buy my company? I'm proposing a merger, Gerald said. Ashford Financial would acquire Chen and Ashford Hospitality. You'd maintain operational control, of course, but under our umbrella. We provide capital for your expansion plans, access to our network, the full resources of our organization, and in return, 60% ownership. Your shares would be worth considerably more as part of Ashford Financial. The deal would make you personally quite wealthy, and your husband would receive a generous payout for his stake. I looked at my mother, whose eyes were glistening with unshed tears, and at Thomas, who still wouldn't meet my gaze. Did you know about this? Dad mentioned it last week, Thomas admitted. I told him it was a terrible idea. Why? My father's voice was sharp. It's a solid business proposition. Any rational person would see the advantages. Any rational person would also see. I said that you didn't give me the time of day until my company was worth enough to solve your problems. I stood up my chair, scraping against the hardwood floor. You didn't come to my wedding. You told me I wasn't in Ashford anymore. You cut me off completely because I married someone you deemed unsuitable and started a business instead of joining yours. I was trying to teach you about consequences, Gerald said. You made choices that reflected poorly on this family. Reflected poorly. The anger I'd been holding back for 3 years was rising now. David is a brilliant architect. He's kind, loyal, and he supported me when I had nothing. What exactly was so terrible about him? He wasn't one of us? The words hung in the air, ugly and undeniable. My mother made a small sound of distress. There it is, I said quietly. The truth you've been dancing around for years. It wasn't about the business. It wasn't about my choices. It was about the fact that you're a snob who cares more about pedigree than character. Watch your tone, Gerald warned. Or what? You'll disown me again. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. You already did that, Dad. You missed my wedding day. Do you have any idea what that felt like? Standing there waiting, thinking maybe you changed your mind at the last minute, Thomas had to walk me down the aisle while Mom cried in the front row, and you sat at home proving your point. My father's face had gone red. You defied me. You chose that man over your family. I chose myself. I chose the person I loved and the life I wanted to build, and you punished me for it by cutting me out completely. I picked up my purse. Now my company is successful, so suddenly I'm worth your time again, but only because you need me to bail out Ashford Financial. This is business, Gerald said coldly. I'm offering you an opportunity that most people would jump at. Most people's fathers show up to their weddings. I started toward the door, then stopped out of curiosity. What were you planning to offer David? My father frowned. What do you mean? In this merger. What role were you planning for my husband, the co-founder of the company you want to acquire? The silence was answer enough. You were going to cut him out, I said. Buy his shares, push him aside, pretend he never existed, just like you tried to pretend our marriage never happened. David Chen is an architect, not a businessman. This discussion is about you using me, I said sharply, to save your failing company, while still refusing to accept my husband as part of this family. I looked at my mother. Did you know about this part, Mom? That Dad's grand plan involved erasing David from the picture. Constance's tears were falling freely now. I told him it was wrong. I told him you'd never agree. But you didn't tell me he was planning it. The betrayal stung more from her than from my father, whose callousness I'd already experienced. You just invited me to dinner and let him ambush me. I hoped maybe we could all work something out, my mother whispered. I've missed you so much. I thought if you were back in our lives, even through business, maybe things could heal. Healing requires apology, Mom. It requires acknowledgement of harm done. I met her eyes. Did Dad apologize for missing my wedding? I turned to Gerald. Did you apologize for telling me I wasn't your daughter anymore? My father stood his hands flat on the table. I will not apologize for trying to protect this family's legacy. Everything I built, everything the Ashford name represents, it matters. It mattered more than I did. That's not fair. Fair. The word came out louder than I intended. You want to talk about fair? Let me tell you what happened after you abandoned me. I moved closer to him. David and I maxed out our credit cards to make the down payment on our first property. We lived in a studio apartment for 2 years, working 18-hour days, eating ramen for dinner. I learned plumbing because we couldn't afford to hire contractors. David slept on the construction site to prevent theft because we couldn't afford security. I could see Thomas listening intently, probably hearing most of this for the first time. We struggled and fought and nearly gave up a dozen times, but we built something real, something we could be proud of. And we did it without your money, without your connections, without anything from the Ashford family, except the name I refused to give up. I stepped even closer, my voice steady. That company is worth $580 million because David and I earned every single dollar. It's ours, and you will never ever get your hands on it. You're being emotional, Gerald said dismissively. In a few days, when you've had time to think rationally about the offer, in a few days, I cut in, you'll read about our Tokyo expansion in the Wall Street Journal. And then you'll see our partnership announcement with the Kimura Group, which will value our company even higher. And you'll know that we did it without you. I headed for the door. If you walk out now, don't expect another invitation, my father called after me. I turned back one last time. Good, I don't want one. Thomas caught up with me in the foyer. Wait, I'll walk you out. Outside on the steps, my brother pulled me into another hug. I'm proud of you, Linda. I should have said that first thing. You walked me down the aisle, I said softly. That was enough. It wasn't, though. Thomas ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so similar to our father's it was startling. I should have stood up to him more. I should have refused to work for him until he made things right with you. You have your own life to live, Thomas. I don't blame you for any of this. Mom does blame herself, you know, he said quietly. She calls me crying about it sometimes. The information settled heavy in my chest. She made her choice too. There was a long pause. She's afraid of him, Thomas said. She always has been. It doesn't excuse it, but it's the truth. I thought about my mother's tears, her desperate hug at the door. How bad is the financial situation, I asked. Bad enough that he's swallowing his pride to ask you for help, which should tell you everything. Thomas glanced back at the townhouse. The Whitmore merger was supposed to save them. When it fell apart, Dad lost a lot of credibility with the board. They're looking at restructuring options. Is the company going under? Not yet, but without a major win, soon it could get ugly. Thomas met my eyes. He's desperate, Linda, which makes him dangerous. Be careful. What can he do to me? I built my business completely separate from his. Dad's been in this world a long time. He knows people, pulls strings. I'm just saying, watch your back. The warning proved prescient. 2 days later, Melissa brought me a stack of messages. We've had some interesting calls this morning, she said carefully. 3 different investors who were confirmed for the Tokyo project have suddenly pulled out. They're all citing concerns about management stability. I felt my stomach drop. Who did they speak with? That's the strange part. Melissa frowned. Each one mentioned receiving information from a concerned party familiar with your family situation. They're worried about potential conflicts between your personal and professional life. Gerald was making his move. When he couldn't buy me, he tried to sabotage me instead. I called Thomas immediately. What do you know about Dad contacting my investors? My brother sighed. He had lunch with Richard Whitmore yesterday. Whitmore sits on the board of Kent Capital, which is one of your Tokyo backers, right? Was one of my backers. They pulled out this morning. There were 2 other lunches this week. I don't know who with, but I can find out. Thomas paused. This is really low, even for him. Can you stop it? I can try, but I'm not the one with leverage here. You are. He was right. I'd been playing defense when I should have been on offense. That evening, I went home to our brownstone in Brooklyn and found David in his home office working on renderings for our Singapore property. We need to talk, I said. My husband looked up immediately concerned. He'd been my rock through everything. With my father never once suggesting I try to reconcile, never pushing me toward decisions that would hurt me. What happened? He asked gently. I told him everything. The dinner, my father's proposal, the investor pullouts. David listened, without interrupting, his expression growing darker with each detail. He's trying to destroy what we built, David said finally, because you wouldn't let him take it over. He's trying, I agreed. But he's given me something valuable. What's that? Information about how desperate he really is. I pulled out my laptop. Remember the Grandview Properties portfolio that went up for sale last month? David's eyes widened. The one Ashford Financial was bidding on. Those are prime locations. 15 properties in major cities, including 3 in Manhattan. The asking price is high, but with the right financing. I was already opening the documents my contact at Goldman had sent me weeks ago. What if we made a competing bid? We'd need serious capital, David said. We have serious relationships now. I thought of the Kimura Group in Tokyo, the Singapore investors, the European partners, who'd been practically begging us to expand into their markets. David stood pacing. He always paced when an idea lit him up. If we won the Grand View portfolio, it would be a direct blow to your father's recovery plan. More than that, it would prove we're major players now, not a boutique operation he can push around. I looked at my husband. But I need to know you're okay with this. It's going to get ugly. He'll see it as warfare, David. Your father made it warfare when he tried to sabotage us, David said firmly. He came to sit beside me. I'm and Linda. We built something even bigger, even better. And we do it our way. The next 3 weeks were a blur. I assembled a consortium of international investors leveraging every relationship I'd built over 5 years. The Kimura Group committed $150 million. Our Singapore partners added $80 million. A family office in Dubai that had been courting us for months contributed another $100 million. When we submitted our bid for the Grand View Properties portfolio, it was $47 million higher than Ashford Financial's offer. The day before the final bid deadline, I received an unexpected call from my father's longtime business partner, Vincent Morrison. We had met a handful of times at charity events when I was younger, and he had always been kind to me. I probably shouldn't be making this call, Vincent said without preamble. But I've known you since you were in pigtails, Linda, and I feel like I owe you some honesty. I'm listening, I said cautiously. Your father came to me last week asking me to help block your Grand View bid. He wanted me to use my connections on their board to raise questions about your financing, maybe delay the decision until he could arrange better terms. Vincent paused. I told him no. The admission surprised me. Why are you telling me this? Because Gerald is spiraling, Vincent said. He's making enemies out of people who could have been allies. He's so focused on beating you that he's forgotten how to actually run his business. His voice grew heavy. I've watched him self-destruct over the past 3 years, and it started the day he decided you were his enemy instead of his daughter. I never wanted to be his enemy. I know, Vincent said. That's why I'm calling. Whatever happens with Grandview, don't let his bitterness poison you too. You've built something remarkable, and you did it with integrity. Keep that even when he tries to drag you into the mud with him. After Vincent hung up, I sat in my office for a long moment looking out at the Manhattan skyline. Part of me wanted to pull back, let my father have this one win, just to avoid further destruction. But another part of me, the part that had survived being disowned, that had built a company from scratch, knew that showing weakness now would only invite more attacks. David found me there an hour later, still staring out the window. Penny for your thoughts, he asked softly. Vincent Morrison called, I said. He said my father tried to get him to sabotage our bid. David's jaw tightened. Did he agree? No, he refused, and then called to warn me. I turned to face my husband. Everyone keeps telling me that my father is falling apart, that this is destroying him. And part of me feels guilty for that. You're not responsible for his choices, David said, coming to stand beside me. He created this situation when he decided loving you came with conditions. When he made you choose between your family and your happiness, and punished you for choosing yourself. I swallowed the old sting, returning. I keep thinking about my wedding day, I whispered, standing there in that stupid expensive dress, checking my phone every 5 minutes, hoping he'd changed his mind. The memory burned even 3 years later. Mom kept making excuses. Traffic. A last-minute business call. Maybe he was just running late. I shook my head, but I knew. Deep down, I knew he wasn't coming. David pulled me close. I would have married you in jeans in a courthouse. All that mattered was you saying yes. I know, I whispered. But I wanted my father there, David. I wanted him to see me happy and realize he was wrong about you, about us. I think David said gently that wanting that doesn't make you weak, Linda. It makes you human. I laughed bitterly. Instead, he doubled down, told me I'd made my choice and had to live with it. And you did live with it, David said. You thrived with it. He tilted my chin up. That's what kills him, Linda. Not that you defied him, but that you were right and he was wrong. His daughter didn't need his money or his approval to succeed. That's a devastating truth for a man like Gerald Ashford. The next morning, we submitted our final bid. The numbers were aggressive, perhaps even slightly reckless, but they reflected our confidence in the portfolio's potential. 3 days of silence followed, during which I barely slept. Every time my phone rang, my heart jumped. Finally, the call came from the Grandview CEO. Miss Ashford, he said, I'm pleased to inform you that your consortium has been selected as the winning bidder. The relief was immediate and overwhelming. Thank you. We're excited to move forward. I should mention, he continued, your father made a last-minute attempt to match your offer. But beyond the financials, our board was impressed by your vision for the properties. You have a track record of successful renovations and operations. That mattered more than Mr. Ashford's established reputation. After the call ended, I allowed myself exactly 3 minutes to celebrate before diving into the mountain of work that came with acquiring 15 properties simultaneously. But those 3 minutes felt like vindication for every doubt, every sleepless night, every moment I wondered if I'd made the right choice. Thomas called me the day the news broke. Dad's having an emergency board meeting, he said. They're furious. Good. He knows you're behind it. He's threatening to... Thomas paused. Do what? Disown me again. Tell me I'm not his daughter. I exhaled. He already did that, Thomas. He has no power over me anymore. But my father wasn't finished. The next salvo came through my mother. Constance called my cell phone, something she rarely did. Please, she said without preamble, please meet me for lunch. Just the two of us. Against my better judgment, I agreed. We met at a quiet French restaurant in Midtown, the kind of place where society women had discreet conversations over china cups. My mother looked even more fragile than she had at the family dinner. When she reached for her teacup, her hand trembled slightly. Your father is talking about divorcing me, she said once the waiter had left. The words hit like a physical blow. What? He blames me for how things turned out with you, she whispered. He says if I'd been firmer when you started dating David, if I'd backed him up instead of secretly supporting you, none of this would have happened. Her voice cracked. He's already spoken to his attorney. Mom, I'm so sorry. Don't be sorry. Be smart. She leaned forward urgently. Pull back from the Grandview deal. Let him have this one win. If the board sees him succeed, if they calm down, maybe he'll calm down too. You want me to sacrifice my business expansion to save your marriage? I'm asking you to help save what's left of this family. Tears filled her eyes. I know your father handled everything wrong. I know he hurt you terribly. But divorce at our age in our social circle, it would destroy everything I've built for 35 years. The realization dawned slowly but unmistakably. He sent you here. No, she said quickly. I came on my own. Did he threaten divorce before or after he found out I was going to win the Grandview bid? She froze. Mom, I said softly. When exactly did this conversation about divorce happen? She looked away, answer enough. He's using you to get to me, I said quietly. Just like he used the family dinner. Just like he's using every connection he has to undermine my business. Linda, he's your father. He gave me nothing. I snapped before I could stop myself. I softened my voice. Everything I had from being in Ashford I worked for. The connections I made, I maintained. The education I earned. And when I needed him most on my wedding day, he gave me abandonment and cruelty. My mother was crying again. I just want my family back together, she whispered. We were never together, Mom. We were just people living in the same house, performing the roles Dad assigned us. I stood leaving money on the table for our meals. I love you, but I won't set myself on fire to keep you warm anymore. The Grandview deal closed 4 weeks later. Chen and Ashford. Hospitality acquired all 15 properties, expanding our portfolio to 58 hotels and increasing our valuation to $890 million. The business press called it a stunning upset and a changing of the guard in New York hospitality. The publicly traded shares of Ashford Financial dropped 8% on the news. 2 board members resigned. Industry analysts began openly questioning whether Gerald Ashford had lost his edge. I didn't take pleasure in my father's suffering, but I didn't mourn it either. This was business as he always reminded me, and in business, the better operation wins. 3 months later, I was at the opening gala for our newest Manhattan property, a breathtaking renovation of one of the Grandview buildings. The ballroom was filled with investors, partners, press, and city officials. David stood beside me as we cut the ribbon, and the applause was warm and genuine. As guests mingled beneath crystal chandeliers and waiters circulated with champagne, Melissa approached with an odd expression. You have a visitor, she said. He's not on the list, but he says it's important. My heart sank when I saw who was waiting in the lobby. Gerald Ashford stood in his overcoat looking every one of his 63 years. The weight he'd gained had settled heavily. The lines around his eyes had deepened into valleys. I'm hosting an event, I said. This isn't a good time. I know. He gestured around him, taking in the transformed lobby, the soaring ceilings, the contemporary art. I saw the coverage. Beautiful work. Your husband has real talent. The compliment was so unexpected I paused. Thank you, I said cautiously. I was wrong, my father said abruptly. About David? About your business? About all of it? I waited. The words seemed to pain him. The board voted me out last week, he said. 40 years building Ashford Financial, and they showed me the door. Your brother tried to fight for me, but he didn't have enough votes either. I'm sorry that happened, I said. He looked up sharply. Are you? He asked softly. Linda, you're the reason it happened. I didn't flinch. You started this, he said bitterly, when you tried to sabotage my Tokyo expansion. I know. He blinked, surprised by the calmness of my reply. He looked away. I know what I did. I know what I've been doing since you met that man. I thought I was protecting the family legacy, but really I was afraid. Afraid of what I asked? That you didn't need me anymore. He exhaled shakily. That you'd build something bigger and better without me. Which meant I wasn't as important as I thought I was. His voice was rough when he continued. And you did exactly that. You built an empire, my father said quietly, while I was busy tearing you down for not following my path. The admission hung between us. This was the closest thing to an apology Gerald Ashford had probably ever given anyone. I missed your wedding because I was a fool, he continued. I missed 3 years of your life because I was stubborn and proud. And now I've lost everything except the truth, which is that you're a better business person than I ever was. Dad, I began, but he held up a hand. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. He straightened his shoulders with a faint echo of his old pride. But I wanted you to know that I was wrong about everything. And watching you succeed, even knowing it contributed to my failure, has been the strangest kind of honor. You're brilliant and tough, Linda, and you didn't learn that from me. Something in my chest loosened slightly. I learned some of it from you, I admitted quietly. The parts that were worth learning. We stood in silence for a moment, two Ashfords who'd gone to war and both paid the price. What will you do now, I asked. Your mother and I are moving to the Connecticut house. Smaller life, quieter. He almost smiled. Maybe I'll take up golf like all the other retired executives. You're not divorcing her. God, no. Gerald shook his head. That was just me being vindictive, trying to find any leverage that might work. Constance is the only good decision I've made in years. Well, that and having you, though I nearly ruined that. Through the ballroom doors, I could hear David giving a speech, thanking our partners, our team, the investors who believed in us. My husband's voice was warm and confident, everything I'd always admired. Would you like to meet him? I asked softly. Properly, I mean not as an adversary or a problem to solve, as my husband. My father's eyes widened just slightly. For the first time in years, he looked uncertain. I don't want to intrude on your event, he said. You're already here, I replied gently. I made the decision quickly before I could think too hard and lose my nerve. Come on. I led him into the ballroom where David was just finishing his remarks. The crowd applauded as he stepped off the stage. When he saw me approaching with my father, his expression shifted, protective alert, but he didn't step back. David, I said quietly, I'd like to introduce you to Gerald Ashford, my father. The two men looked at each other for a long moment, an entire history in their silence. Then David extended his hand. Mr. Ashford, I've heard a lot about you. My father took his hand. All of it terrible, I'm sure. David gave a small smile. Not all of it. Your daughter speaks very highly of your business acumen, even when she's frustrated with you personally. My daughter is generous, Gerald said. He was still holding David's hand. I owe you an apology, Mr. Chen. I judged you without knowing you, and I tried to erase your contributions to a company you built from nothing. That was inexcusable. David's eyebrows lifted slightly, taken aback. I appreciate you saying that. I mean it. Gerald looked around at the transformed room, the stunning architecture, the polished elegance that was unmistakably David's design. This building, what you've created here, it's extraordinary work. He finally released David's hand. You're talented, and you clearly make my daughter happy, which is more important than anything else. They talked for a few more minutes, careful, polite, feeling their way into something that resembled peace. Eventually, my father excused himself. I've taken enough of your time, he said, stepping back. He turned toward the exit, then paused, looking at the crowded ballroom. The glowing lights, the whole world I had built without him, he said. You did good, kid. Really good. After he left, I felt David slip his arm around my waist. What just happened? He whispered. I think my father just grew up a little. I leaned into him, my head against his shoulder. Or maybe I did. David kissed my temple. Can you forgive him? I didn't answer immediately. I was thinking, really thinking. 3 years of silence, a missed wedding, cruelty, sabotage, manipulation. But also tonight an admission of fault that probably cost him more pride than losing his company ever could. Eventually I said softly, but on my terms, in my time. That sounds exactly right, David murmured. The truth was, I didn't need my father's approval anymore. I had already proven everything to him, to the world, to myself. Chen and Ashford hospitality was mine and David's, built on our terms, reflecting our values. Whether Gerald came around or not wouldn't change that. But having him try, having him finally see me, felt like closing a door I'd been holding open for too long, not with a slam, but with a quiet click of finality. The next morning, a package arrived at my office. Inside was a small velvet box containing my grandmother's pearl earrings, the ones she'd promised me when I was a little girl, the ones my father kept locked away after the wedding incident. The note inside was in my father's handwriting. These were always meant to be yours. I'm sorry it took me so long to remember that some things are more valuable than being right. Love, Dad. I held the earrings up to the light, remembering my grandmother placing them in my small hands, telling me I'd wear them someday at my wedding. She died before that day, before she could see me walk down the aisle, before she could see David, before she could see who I became. But as I looked at the pearls, perfect, luminous, I realized something. I could still wear them, to the life I had built, the one that was entirely mine. I put them on and looked in the mirror. They suited me, not because they were Ashford heirlooms, but because I'd finally become someone who could wear them on her own terms. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother. Dad told me about last night. Thank you for giving him a chance. We'd love to have you and David for Sunday brunch sometime. Whenever you're ready. No pressure. Love you. I stared at the message for a long moment before responding. Maybe in a few weeks. We're pretty busy with the new property opening in Singapore. I'll let you know. It was honest, and it felt like progress. I didn't know if my relationship with my parents would ever be fully repaired, but at least now it could be real, built on truth instead of performance, on mutual respect instead of obligation. And if healing never fully happened, well, I'd survived worse. I'd survived being cut off, being told I wasn't good enough, being sabotaged by the man who was supposed to protect me. I'd survived it all and built something extraordinary in the process. The pearl earrings caught the light as I turned back to my desk where 3 new property contracts waited for my signature. My father's approval had come 3 years too late to matter in the way he'd wanted. But maybe, just maybe, it had come at exactly the right time for me to accept it without needing it. That felt like the real victory. Not the $890 million evaluation, not the 58 properties, not the glowing headlines calling me a visionary. The real victory was standing in my office, wearing my grandmother's pearls, and finally, completely being free.